And here we are. I believe we are live. Connor and I are back. K&C Basketball Podcast on the air. And, if you're watching this on YouTube, obviously you can kind of figure out our special announcement. But we're going to be doing this on Global Basketball's website now. So thank you to Global Basketball. I had a great chance to work with the guys over there in Las Vegas during their summer league. Thank you to Daryl Reshaw, who's in charge of Global Basketball, everybody on the staff there for giving Connor and I this opportunity to put our podcast here on Global Basketball's website. And, we kind of, guess what a month hiatus is fair to say. Literally, we're at a pretty good clip there starting towards the end of June around Game 5 of the finals. We were going through the beginning of free agency, previewed it, and then I guess it kind of
some MacBook Pro malfunctions along the way.
Yeah, this guy's been hitting the links there a little bit. You see he's got the hat and everything. But, we've been following, of course, and if you follow us on Twitter, of course, you should definitely do that because we like to do that. Sam at Sam Koop is my thing. Connor, what is it? It's just at Connor Weingarten.
At C Weingarten 123. Really creative with the numbers, but you get some good hard hitting basketball analysis.
You get everything.
Some politics if you want. You can reply, tell me stick to sports, whatever you want. I probably won't, but
the thing is though, with your Twitter, I feel like the conversation goes from one place to the other in such a quick time frame.
Constantly, you never know.
Like I'll see you tweeting about whatever golf tournament's going on, and then within a minute, like in that same minute,
could be cricket.
You're tweeting something about You're tweeting something about the Yankees. Like it's very impressive how you can do because for me at least, I can't go one conversation to the other in that kind of time frame. But
a lot of screen time. I was actually at the Yankees-Mets game last night, Sam.
Oh, really?
It was a good win for New York.
I haven't watched the Yanks much this year. I did watch that one. I know Robles got into some stuff there with Teixeira, potentially stealing. I don't know if you caught that from the stands, but
yeah, it was something about stealing signs. I don't know. Teixeira's probably just a little depressed that he can't get over that Mendoza line.
True. It's a rough season for the guys in pinstripes, but hey, big trade. I mean, we are not a baseball podcast, but I will say, as a Yankees fan, obviously you see
that jersey in the background.
See the jersey in the background. Connor, you're obviously being a Yankees fan being there. Well, good times are ahead, but good times are also ahead for Oklahoma City Thunder. Russell Westbrook, big extension today. 3 years, $85 million after about every team in any sort of major market on the face of the earth saying that they're going to find a way to trade for him. Every fan getting excited that, he's definitely going to leave OKC, but lo and behold, they got him, and I'm happy. First and foremost, I mean, for Russell Westbrook, it's going to be a great feeling. The reins are handed over to him. There's no more debate whose team it is. KD made the decision he made. He's comfortable with it, and that's fine, but Russell Westbrook is now in a position where the team will be built around him. So it's nice for him to have that, and then for the Oklahoma City fans, they now know that they'll still be able to watch a competitive basketball team, and they're not in position to contend for a title right now. I'd say that, they're ceiling probably second round of the playoffs with this team, and I do like this team a lot, but it's good for the team that they have a team to root for that's competitive versus a team that's going to be through a long haul of a rebuild. So I think on that front, it's great for both sides.
Yeah, it's great for Oklahoma City from the standpoint that now they know Russell Westbrook wants to be there. I think he's a guy who doesn't really talk to the media too much. He's not really clear about what's going through his head, and that's not a bad thing. He's a pretty guarded guy. But now he's the guy in the city that he gets an extension. They'll have a player option after the 2017-18 season, pretty much just so he can secure a max. It's not clear whether he'll want to explore at that point, but he always has wanted the ball in his hands, and he's really going to have that chance for 40 minutes unleashed, really. There's not a great second option on the perimeter. So this team's going to go probably as far as he takes them, and it's huge for them to lock him up. Because if they had to trade him, it would have been it wouldn't have quite been hitting the reset button, but you would have brought in younger assets, maybe draft guys that were just drafted. But this gives you an opportunity to at least contend for the playoffs, maybe win 45, 50 games.
Well, my issue with the whole idea that they should trade him, just rebuild, what you have to look at it in a situation like, when are you going to get someone over time as good as Russell Westbrook, even if you get a plethora of draft picks? And part of the problem is, if Sam Presti was putting Russell Westbrook out there, it would be in a situation where teams know they can kind of relatively lowball him because he's in a position, if he's trading his franchise player that he thinks Westbrook won't sign there, there's a good chance he won't. So at that point, it'll be far below market value. So it would be a very tough pill to swallow for those fans. But now you keep Westbrook, and I think the easy comparison here is going to be that, oh, you remember the year 2 years ago when Durant was out for almost all of the season. I think he played a total of like 26 games that year, battling the foot issues. But when Durant was out and Westbrook, who he missed like the first 15 games, but he had that crazy second half of the year where he was putting up a triple-double every night, and the Thunder just missed the playoffs. This is a different team. Yes, it's Russell Westbrook's team now, just like it was then, but there's so much more depth around him now versus then. There is so much more developed talent. You look at a guy like Steven Adams now, night and day, and his Cantor fitting in nicely. Oladipo, huge addition. And I think they've gotten younger since that time. You look at some of the picks, and in limited action last year, we saw some things out of Cameron Payne. Getting Sabonis in the Ibaka deal. I think that this team will be better than, some pundits will think, because a lot of people will try to say that with just Russell Westbrook, because he has gotten so much heat over the years as to, he's not a pass-first point guard. That's an issue. People saying he's not a real point guard. But he's the leader of this team, and I think these guys are going to rally around him. And I think the other big difference is Billy Donovan behind the bench. We saw what kind of adjustments he's capable of, and it's truly remarkable how they were able to beat the Spurs because, quite frankly, I didn't see after that first game in the second round last year how on earth the Thunder would stand a chance. But they won in 6 games because after getting walloped in game 1, Billy Donovan made tremendous moves there. He made tremendous adjustments. He was able to recognize that playing big against the Spurs would be beneficial. Playing Cantor and Adams together a lot, which he hadn't done all year, worked out marvelously. And I think Billy Donovan has solidified himself as one of the better coaches in the league. And we saw what he's able to do at the collegiate level, bringing Florida to so many Final Fours at a football school, honestly changing that into more of a basketball notable program. But then he comes to Oklahoma City and he gains the respect of these guys, and he's able to lead them to within a game of going to the NBA Finals. So I think that this Thunder team is different than that team 2 years ago. And I think that's the thing a lot of people get twisted. They're going to say, that's what you're going to get out of Russell Westbrook. Is this team ready to win right away? Win as in really make a push for the finals? No, they're at least a year off from that. But it's going to be a fun team to watch, and I'm excited to see Westbrook take the reins.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be fun. And I agree with the point you make about Billy Donovan that he's going to be very important. I think it's a little early to say he's a top-tier coach in the league, but he did make good adjustments. But a lot of those, or a big adjustment was the fact also that Kevin Durant played some of the best defense we've ever seen him play, particularly on Kawhi Leonard. And they lose Kevin Durant. Obviously, that's a gaping hole at the 3 now. So it's on Billy Donovan to figure out what he's going to do with that lineup. Do you put Robertson there? Do you put Kyle Singler of all people there?
Oladipo's not big. I mean, he's 6'4", but he's so athletic that I think you could theoretically, depending on how you want to shape-shift your lineup, I mean, depending on how it goes down the line, I don't see that as something you can rule out. Maybe. I mean, I don't think Oladipo's ever really played the 3, but I think Billy Donovan's shown that he's been able to get creative enough that he would consider doing something like that.
Robertson would play the 2? Is that what you think?
Well, I mean, I don't how you want to do it is put shooters around Russell Westbrook. You could insert, I don't know, a guy
they don't really have shooters. That's the only thing.
For argument's sake, you could put a guy like Anthony Morrow in there at the 2. Not that they would. I'm just saying that there's enough in the cupboard there that Donovan can get creative, even though Robertson, ideally, you want his shot to be a little better because that was the one thing you'd see in games. And Robertson had some big games in the playoffs. He had that 120-point game. I forget when it was, but I know that there were times where he was so hesitant with his shot, and guys were getting frustrated with him.
He was kind of the Oklahoma version of Harrison Barnes, where he'd get left open and he just kept missing, and that frustration builds up.
Most brutal finals. I mean, that was something. He is an Olympian. That's something we'll get to shortly, but we'll stick on this Westbrook topic for a minute. Now, when you look at that extension he signed, so we talked about they have a little bit of a window now you have essentially 2 more years because it would make sense for him to opt out after these 2 years because he'll be at the 10 years where he can get 35% of the cap, where assuming that things continue on this path with the new collective bargaining agreement at that point, that when you get to that point, Westbrook's going to be making so much money, and I don't have the numbers in front of me, but
I think I saw Ramona Shelburne say that it could be something like 5 years over 200 million.
yeah,
So it's like
204.
that'd be 40 million a year, right?
Yeah, no, but like the way like the contract works, I saw like some numbers at one point where I think down the line at some point he's gonna make like $45 million a year, which is just unheard of considering. Let's just put this in perspective. Until he signed this extension, he was set to make what, like 17 this year? Like it's crazy how this cap is really really headed in such an interesting direction, but that's that TV money funneling in. But now we look at the Thunder, and I said that they're a team that I'd put probably second round of the playoffs as their peak. But where do you see them stacking up in the West? Because I see them anywhere in that, I'd say 4 to 7 range. I think top 3, who's number 1. The team that just got Kevin Durant. I think it's fair to say that they're number 1. But then Spurs, Clippers, and then after that, I think it's a crapshoot between a few teams. But I'd say the Thunder are definitely in there. Jazz is sleeper. Few teams of that nature. You don't know what the Rockets are going to do. Bounce back year. A few Blazers, obviously. Few teams like that 7 range. But there's that top 3, and then I think there's a little bit of a drop off. But it'd be cool to see potential Warriors Thunder second round. That would be some entertainment value right there.
Yeah, anytime we get them matched up. I don't know if they're playing on Christmas, but maybe I think they should be because Westbrook's just going to get that.
It's probably going to be Warrior. I feel like it's Warriors Clippers on Christmas every year, and there's always
That's true.
Beef going on between those guys.
Westbrook's going to have it out though. When they get on the court, he's going to be throwing down hard jams. He's going to be making Kobe snares at guys. I can't wait to watch.
He's going for 50 every game. Every time he plays. Every time Russell Westbrook is playing Kevin Durant, he's going for 50. Now, I don't care what they say. He's going to be the one that just give him the ball, let him go to work. And I don't know how that strategy will fare against the Warriors, but right out the gate there, Westbrook's going to go for it. And that's going to be fun to watch.
Yeah, and it's just another great storyline. I mean, as much as Golden State kind of swallowed the headlines getting Kevin Durant, I think this is the second part of that story is that, first of all, what was Russell Westbrook going to do? Because that was kind of captivating, whether he was going to be traded, whether he's going to want to leave. But now he's extended. Now this is his basketball team. He's one of those guys, that rare personality that reminds you of a guy like Kobe Bryant, guys you don't see very often in this league, particularly in the last 5 to 10 years. So he's a guy who's going to try and take over games. And I think their ceiling's probably a 5 seed. But it's another great story to watch. I just don't think.
Well, let me ask you this: if you're going to say their ceiling's a 5 seed, who would you put at the 4 in that hypothetical scenario?
I think Utah or Portland, and
okay,
I'm leaving someone out. I think like you said, Warriors, Spurs, Clippers. That's the first 3.
Yeah.
I think the Clippers have just had every possible bad break in the last couple of years. Some of it self-inflicted. Blake Griffin punching a guy.
I don't know if you had a chance to, Connor. I don't know if you had a chance to listen, but recently, actually yesterday, I listened to Woj's podcast occasionally.
Yeah,
and he had a great interview with Doc Rivers. I'd highly recommend for anyone.
I listened to that,
but yeah, Doc talks a lot about that, like how 2 of the 3 years self-inflicted, and like he alluded to Donald Sterling being relative, obviously not in the players, but self-inflicted in terms of the team, how they were collapsed after that, and. They were the last team in the West to beat the Warriors in a playoff series.
So the idea that Curry, I think it was the first round or the second round, when Curry goes down with that little injury.
Yeah, it was first against Houston.
And you're looking like the Clippers. I don't know if the Thunder had beaten the Spurs at that point, but it was looking like the Clippers would be able to handle whoever was in their way. It was looking like they were going to be that team in the Western Conference.
Well, at that point, that was Thunder Mavs at that. But the Thunder they were playing the Mavs during that first round.
Okay.
But yeah, no, that's another thing that Doc Rivers was saying. Him and Woj were talking about that. In that scenario, they're confident they can hang with the Warriors. They always play them well, and now with Kevin Durant, it's a very different team. but that core is still intact. And, I mean, look, a healthy Clippers team, I'd still think they're a ways off, but you never know in a playoff series. All it takes is one injury. So, we'll see. We'll see how Blake comes back. I know he's still a little ways away from being back to where he wants to be health-wise. I know the Clippers, every year they kind of, tweak with that bench, given the minimalistic cap space that they have.
They had some good low-level additions.
Yes, that's what I was going to do. Between Mo Spates, Raymond Felton I like a little bit, and
Brandon Bass, a guy Doc Rivers has had around a lot.
Right. And the other one, I was looking through just the team today, and I didn't even realize this because there were so many signings. I didn't realize some of the low-level signings, but they got Allen Anderson too. I guess he opted out with the Wizards, or they had him on a minimum deal, so I guess he's trying to play for that bigger contract. But he can play backup too. I mean, he had some great moments in Brooklyn. Having watched him as a fan, I can tell you, like, from watching it, what Allen Anderson's capable of doing. But Doc Rivers has proven to make some shrewd low-level signings. The issue has always been that team getting over the hump. And you talk about self-inflicted or not, but they're there. They're close, but
window's closing.
There always seems to be a little bit of a divide between them and then the Warriors, the Spurs, and the Thunder with KD. But we'll see. I mean, people have been saying for a few years this could be the year they kind of power through a little bit. It looks like this is going to have to be the year they power through.
Yeah, and just going back to Oklahoma City for a minute, I say their ceiling's a 5 seed. I think those top 3 teams are pretty solidified. So I don't know what the order exactly is.
I think it's
figure Golden State will be first. I don't think San Antonio got better necessarily, so I'm not going to be surprised if they're not the 2 seed.
That's fair.
I just think they got older and they lost Diaw, David West left. Like, those aren't good players, but they didn't really bring anyone in who's going to help them too much.
I mean,
Duncan's.
I'd say Pau Gasol helps him a little bit. I think that's fair to say.
I don't agree with that, really. I don't really think he's an upgrade. He's like maybe a little bit better than Tim Duncan, but Gasol doesn't play any defense, and
he doesn't need to start, but he can come on. I mean,
he can move the ball at the free throw line a little bit, I guess.
I mean, I think the thing with the Spurs more than anything else is Kawhi Leonard's only getting better. I mean, he took the next step so much last year. Just imagine what's in store for him. And you want to talk about how rapidly a guy can develop to a point where, I mean, Kawhi is already taking over games, but you look at the way Steph over these past few years has transitioned into the player that he is today. He was only an all-star for the first time a few years ago. I mean, Kawhi has already taken that major leap towards stardom. I mean, he was first team this year after kind of being an under-the-radar guy for a few years back. But, I mean, I think when you have a guy like Kawhi Leonard, you're automatically in that spot. And then you look at the vets they have around them, and you make some valid points in regards to losing key cogs to the team. But if there's anybody that can funnel guys in there and find a place for them and teach them the way, it's Greg Popovich. So, but regardless, though, even so, I will say that you're right on the Clippers. I mean, they could, if everybody is healthy, if everything goes the way it should, they definitely could get that 2 seed. That's definitely fair.
Yeah, and you got to think, I think Portland, Utah, I think Minnesota is going to sneak up there if they can get it together there. And I think it's just going to be a mix-up there. It's going to be a mix-up at 4, 5, 6, 7. Could be a lot of teams.
Yeah,
I just don't think Oklahoma City.
Most teams in the West, you could potentially throw their name in a hat and say they could compete for that spot. But there's definitely a divide between the top 3 teams and everybody else.
Yeah, and Oklahoma City, the only reason I hesitate to put them in that top tier is when Westbrook was playing without Durant previously. He had great numbers, but the style of play wasn't really conducive to a lot of good wins. I mean, they kind of had to squeak out. They had to squeak out wins. He was taking a lot of shots. In this scenario, I don't know where else he's going to go to. Like maybe like Cantor and Adams, but I mean the post game in this NBA isn't really conducive to too much success. So I think they got to find someone to hit shots from the outside. I think they're going to be really good perimeter defensively.
Well, yeah, they will.
Defensively on the perimeter.
That's what Oladipo coming in there is a huge help to that. I think Oladipo, I mean, I know he put up these numbers in Orlando, but he did just come off putting up was it 16, 17 points a game? I mean, Oladipo, you see what he can do offensively. he's a very good player, and I think he gets a little he's a little under the radar sometimes. But I think there's enough shooters on this Thunder team that the general strategy, at least the way I see it right now, is you have Westbrook, obviously the ball dominant guy. You put Oladipo with him on the perimeter, and then you surround them with shooters, and then you have the bigs and Cantor and Adams. You rotate them in, occasionally play them together. But Ilyasova, who they could have got rid of that contract had KD stayed to free up cap room, but they have him on a 1-year deal. The last year of his deal, he's a big that can shoot. I mean, there are some guys in this team that fly under the radar that I think OKC will be better than they're giving credit for, and we'll see what they can do. But it's Sabonis, so just forget about him. Another guy they brought in. I liked him as a draft pick, but all in all, it's a better team than the team that missed the playoffs 2 years ago. That's my general point, that with Adams having gotten better, Cantor finding a role, Billy Donovan an improvement behind the bench, it's a better team at that point, and we'll see where they fall on the laundry list of teams in the West capable of being a middle-tier team in that playoff race. And I think the Jazz is the one that's with their I think they made some of the best moves of the offseason. If you made a top five list of teams that made good moves in the offseason, you obviously look at the team that got Kevin Durant as number one, but then you go through there, the Jazz, I mean, I think they're still under the floor, if I'm not mistaken, of the salary cap. They made so many good moves, and they didn't overspend one bit. It's unbelievable that in this crazy cap, the Utah Jazz were able to find guys that were not too expensive and just made smart moves to add vets to their core of young players.
Yeah, there are not going to be many teams in the NBA that have two better guys come off the bench than Boris Diaw and Joe Johnson. And you put Dante Exum in there as almost an off-season acquisition because he missed all of last year. He's a guy from Australia who was a really highly touted prospect, and he's a good point guard. And we didn't even mention George Hill, who completely fits the bill. They're a really good defender and a huge upgrade from Trey Burke because he just wasn't giving him anything on either end. And, another year, Rodney Hood, Gordon Hayward, more confident. And
Rudy Gobert was hurt for a lot last year. Rudy Gobert,
right, he's a really good player.
A factor. If you have a healthy Rudy Gobert in that team,
Favors.
Yeah, of course. And I mean, as a Nets fan, I can tell you about Derek Favors. I watch him now, and it's like we gave this guy half a season before trading him in the Darren Williams deal. But past the past. But I think time to move on. I know you talked about at one point during this conversation, you mentioned the Westbrook in terms of his mentality, Kobe-like. Just want to briefly touch on this. This potential retirement class. I mean, crazy. Kobe already obviously retired. Duncan retired recently. Pierce and KG both on the fence about it. Amari recently retiring. And what's interesting about the Amari ordeal is that he wanted to play with the Suns. Like, he didn't want to retire, at least for some reports I've read. I mean, he didn't want to retire, apparently. But
the Suns said no, right?
Yeah, the Suns weren't going to bring him back. So he makes a great move of retiring, but retiring as a Knick, and then going over to Israel to play where he's going to be right now. I think the team is Hypel Jerusalem. So Amari just not pleased that the Suns wouldn't have him play there, I guess, this year. But I guess, I mean, that's Ryan McDonough wants to do what he wants to do. That's fine. But
yeah, I mean,
that's fair.
I guess it had to be strategic.
Yeah, no, it's understandable. But point being, this retirement class, crazy. And I know, again, just alluding back to that podcast I told you about with Woj and Doc Rivers, the big thing, I mean, Doc was going on and on about just the mentality of these guys and how it was different. He had some great stories in there about KG and the kind of energy he brought that was just so unmatched. But the biggest thing he said, and not to be too critical of Kobe here, but I don't think this one would apply to Kobe knowing what we know about those mid-2000 years with the Lakers, but these guys are just so willing and able to be coached, and the automatic respect they give to a coach right off the bat is one thing he talked about with Doc, with KG, Pierce, and Tim Duncan, how, it doesn't matter what level the coach is at. These old school guys just come in and respect the coach right away. And it's not to knock new school guys as much as kind of a changing in the times. These guys, they're getting more right away with AAU and the way things are evolving, the natural attention that these guys are getting at a young age. I mean, look, I mean, they have tournaments to evaluate 10-year-olds now. I mean, it's really a whole different ball game.
LeBron Jr.'s got
Yeah.
scholarship offers.
Yeah, it's out of control. So, but it's a different time. Guys are coming in. Back in the day, guys were they come into a locker room, they'd be in all the vets there. Now it's just like, oh, another guy in the locker room that happens to be really good at basketball. So, it's different, but, that's my childhood. That's your childhood. Kevin Garnett's, he's definitely, I know recently there was some question on Twitter, like I forget who posted it, but it was named like a starting 5 of like your 5 favorite players to watch growing up. And KG was on there for me. I loved watching him. And even though it didn't work out in Brooklyn, I mean, having him on my team for a year and a half was special. And when I had an internship at New York One last winter, I went in the locker room like a few times to cover the games for them, and just seeing Kevin Garnett there in person was really just jaw-dropping to me, to see someone I respected so much. But between him, Tim Duncan, Pierce, Kobe, assuming that, I mean, KG and Pierce again are on the fence, they could come back. KG said he wants, but his body might. Pierce is just getting time to decide. But whether they retire or not, this is a special retirement class. But I haven't seen anything like this, so there's a lot of nostalgia kicking in here.
Yeah, and just what really sticks out about all 4 of them is the work ethic and just, the grit they played with and how bad they wanted it. And you could just always see it on their face. The NBA over time has kind of gotten a bad rap. Guys taking nights off or giving up on one end of the floor. And maybe Kobe did that a little bit. But as these guys got older, maybe, it declined a little bit, but they still had that fire there. And you could see it. And it's just, a changing of the guard. It's Kevin Garnett has coached up Karl Towns a little bit. Maybe that'll be that next guy. I don't think Kobe did much coaching with those Lakers teams. But, Pierce had a good time with Doc Rivers. And
actually,
Amari Stoudemire, another guy.
They show Kobe on the bench sometimes when he wasn't playing. They'd show him coaching. It was always fun to watch. And
it seemed pretty one-sided.
Yeah. Yeah, not much of a give and take there, no.
Yeah. Speaking of podcasts we listened to, I was listening to one of those Ringer ones, and Ringer NBA, and they had Roy Hibbert on, and he was telling some Kobe stories about how all the guys would get on the plane. They'd all get on the plane together, and then they'd wait 50 minutes, and Kobe would roll in his helicopter, and he'd walk onto the plane and say, "You guys are lucky I'm riding this plane with you." So he I don't know how he quite enjoyed that last ride with all those young guys Snapchatting each other and whatnot. But
yeah,
they're four generational guys, 4 Hall of Famers. Stoudemire, I think, could probably be a Hall of Famer too. He'll be a borderline guy, but 5 guys who really, they furthered the game of basketball. And in Stoudemire's case, he played on a Suns team that maybe was the prelim to the Golden State Warriors that we're watching now. So guys that really changed the game, and guys we're never going to forget.
Yeah, I think at some point Amari's Hall of Fame worthy. I mean, there's a lot of debate about that, and there's not really, with the Basketball Hall of Fame, there's not much of a is this guy a Hall of Famer or not kind of thing.
It's just when.
It's just either it happens or not, with some of these guys. But I think Amari will, just based on how dominant he was during the years he was in the league until he got hurt with the Knicks, because he won Rookie of the Year right off the bat, 02-03. Let's not forget that. I mean, that was Yao Ming's first year in the league. Amari was the MVP that year. Amari, right off the bat, was dominant, and he continued all the way through. And his first year with the Knicks, he carried that team, and he brought back a little bit of that New York Knicks nostalgia for some of these fans, seeing how the Garden got hyped for Amari and company. Raymond Felton having a good year that year, and then the Melo trade happened, and some things didn't work out. Linsanity mixed in there, and then Amari's knees ultimately just gave out on him, which is unfortunate. But you talk about Amari Stoudemire, he did a lot for the game. And during his prime, he was a force to be reckoned with, and he was one of the best forwards in the game. No question about it. He played some center as well. But tough loss to the NBA for all these guys, but some great times were had with them. But I think, we're talking about superstars. We'll move on to the superstars down in Rio. Olympics open tomorrow, and I think it's fair to say Team USA is the clear through and through favorite in this tournament. And not much of a debate there, but I will say that for all that everyone talks about, Olympic basketball is so non-competitive, I didn't read what he had to say, but I did see something floating around on Twitter that Bill Simmons said something that USA should be a 25 and under kind of team. But for all of that, I think there's a few interesting storylines coming out of Rio that will be fun to monitor. And when you get to those later rounds, not that USA is going to lose, but they'll have some competitive games with the likes of Spain, Argentina, depending on the bracket shape out. Croatia, kind of a dark horse in that with Saric, Bogdanovic.
I love Croatia.
Yeah, I think that it'll be more entertaining than people give it credit for. And 4 years ago, it was the same thing. I mean, you had even more star power on the team 4 years ago with LeBron being healthy and all that and everybody being there. It didn't matter. It was still fun to watch. And I think that there's going to be a lot of fun in Rio for this team and Coach K's last year running the organization.
Yeah, and it gives guys a chance to get their first licks in the Olympics. I think Durant and Carmelo are the only guys that have played in Olympics before on this team. You get some younger guys without this exact experience. You get Kyrie Irving, DeRozan, Lowry, I guess all of them. But guys like DeMarcus, this is a huge highlight for a guy like DeMarcus Cousins, who maybe he can link up some of these teammates and figure out a way to get himself out of Sacramento. I think it's underlying storylines like that, like Klay Thompson, Kevin Durant, and Draymond Green playing together on the court at the same time, getting familiar with each other.
I mean,
Paul George getting another crack at it.
Years ago. Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of
Harrison Barnes being on the team. Who's he going to get water for? Will he get in the game?
Yeah, well, I mean, we'll see how these games shape out, obviously, but I think but there's always been guys like a Harrison Barnes on the Olympics teams. I mean, I think that got kind of overblown. 2 years, I mean, in 2008, Tayshaun Prince was on that team. I mean, he was, as much as he was a key part of those Pistons teams and the team that won the championship, I mean, he was never an all-star before. I mean, there have been guys that have been in that slot. You also look at Tyson Chandler was a very good defensive player, but there's definitely some drop-offs sometimes with some of the players because even though you want just the best players possible, they got to be able to play together. So I understood the Harrison Barnes move, especially with all the guys that dropped out.
There's a rhyme and reason to everything, yeah.
Right. But all in all, I think the biggest storyline, and we've seen this a little bit in the exhibitions, we'll see it in full force when the games start playing, but the guys in Golden State are going to be playing together, and Steph won't be there, but Draymond, Klay, and KD, they will be on the court together, and they're going to be in the starting lineup together, it seems to be. Coach K hasn't officially announced the lineup, but based on what we've seen, all signs point to a starting lineup of Kyrie, those three, and Boogie at the 5. So it'll be fun to watch those guys play together, get a little sneak peek of how dominant the Warriors are going to be. Kyrie coming off being the FIBA MVP a few years ago. He just building off his incredible finals performance. You mentioned the guys in Toronto, Lowry, DeRozan, getting a crack at it. DeAndre Jordan. There's going to be a lot of fun to watch here, led by Carmelo Anthony. But it's going to be clear domination in most of the games for the United States. Be a few close calls, but there just really isn't a scenario where they don't take gold. I mean, simply put, but I think there will be some fun along the way.
Yeah, there's always going to be fun. I mean, you get to watch the most talented guys in the world just go out, and it's going to look like they're playing pickup basketball, but there's going to be some method to the madness. You assume this is going to be one of the better defensive teams I think USA's had in a while, and you can throw you don't even really need a true point guard. If you can throw a lineup with Jimmy Butler, Klay Thompson, Durant, Draymond, and DeAndre, you can get some crazy length and athleticism out there. And, yeah, in all likelihood, they're going to stomp on these teams. You think France can probably give them a game? Spain, I don't know, without Marc Gasol, but it's always fun. You get to see a couple international guys you're not used to, and one more ride for Coach K, one more gold medal, one more thing to add to his resume, and then it'll be Popovich's turn, and I'm sure he'll do just as well.
Yeah, just to throw one more storyline out there that just something to monitor when we talk about, adjustments in the offseason, guys changing teams, the way the new look Bulls are with Rondo and D Wade, Jimmy Butler ideally is going to have to slide over to the 3. He'll probably have a chance to play a good amount of that on this team, just looking at the roster makeup, because you have a lot of wings on this team. And Butler is a larger guy. I think he's listed like 6'7", but with the way this team looks, you imagine I think Butler will play a decent amount at the three. So you have a chance to see him playing that role a lot more than you did in Chicago. So I think that's another thing just to monitor. But all in all, I mean, you can talk about all you want. It's gonna be a dominant team, but it's gonna be fun. And obviously, there's a lot of guys you'd want to see on there that aren't there. But there's still so much star power that it'll be enjoyed by the fans. I think that's fair to say. And
Yeah, there's no doubt about it.
And I guess the final thing we'll get here today, just want to just generally, I know that free agency, obviously, the big moves have been long gone, but I think all in all, the rosters are about shaped up the way you want to see them. There's still a few pieces on various rosters still waiting to, get situated. But now we know how these teams looked, and I guess I'd say we'll just do 3 teams each that we really liked during the offseason. I guess I'll put you on the spot here because I'm the one that asked the question. Or we can go 1 for 1. We can go 1 for 1 if we want to not have to throw 3 out there at the same time. How do
you yeah, I feel like it's pretty obvious that Golden State came out pretty well. I think we talked about Utah.
Yeah,
I just think
it's a big one to elaborate on. Yeah,
all they do, they lose Trevor Booker. That's their only loss, and Boris Diaw just there. That's an addition. Then you bring in Joe Johnson. You get Exum for a whole year. And then these young guys just have another year of experience. I think that's so important. Quinn Snyder, a young up-and-coming coach, that's not a roster that you look at and you're like, this is the most talented roster in the league. But they have guys that can do individual things. They have really good athletes. And they have a versatile front court, too, which a lot of teams are really searching for in this small ball era. And they still have money left over, like you said. So they're in a really good spot. I think they're going to compete in the middle of that Western Conference, and they're going to have a chance to win a playoff series, I think. And you can't ask for much more if you're a Utah Jazz fan.
Yeah, I think this is finally about the time that the Jazz make that next step. We've talked about now it's 2 years in the making. They were close 2 years ago. They were close last year. Now they're going to be that team that's, in the thick of things in terms of the middle of the West. I mean, they're not competing for a title, but it'd be a lot of fun to watch. And when you have that many assets and that many young players playing together so well, you kind of start to get yourself set as a destination. Now, we're a long ways away from saying Utah's a destination for NBA players, but you never know how it's going to add up here. But right now, if they can play some good basketball, they can prove to be a spot guys want to go to because, again, I just mentioned it before, cap space is looking pretty good for them for the long term right now. And I mean, eventually guys will have to get paid that are on small salaries. But at that same time, that's how the Warriors got built because Steph was on a favorable salary, a few guys on that team on favorable salaries. So long ways away from proclaiming anything like that. But, Utah is in a great position right now, and I think that's a good team. Indiana is one I'll just throw out there as a team I really liked for what they did in the offseason. You do lose George Hill, but you managed to – in some ways it's a downgrade. In some ways it's an upgrade. I'd say it's a net upgrade bringing in Jeff Teague over George Hill. You lose some of the defensive end, but the Thad Young deal was tremendous for them, giving up a second-round pick next year and the 20th overall pick, which turned into Karis LeVert for the Nets, which I'm iffy on until we see anything from him on the court. But you do that, the Al Jefferson signing, you have Paul George, Monte Ellis still, obviously. They made a few moves up and down that roster, and they're in position right now to be, I'd say, top 3-4 team in the West. The East, sorry, my mistake. But I think after Cleveland, Toronto, there's no reason to say that Indiana's not right there at this point with what they've brought into their arsenal. And I really like the way Larry Bird went about that without really mortgaging anything. He was just able to make smart moves there. Miles Turner, another year of development for him. They really were high on him when they drafted him. And now Nate McMillan, the new head coach, been an assistant there for a little bit. NBA veteran coach, coached in Portland a little while back, but they want to play up tempo. Now you have a roster to do it. So I love what they did in Indiana.
Yeah, I think Miles Turner, that's the guy to watch. You mentioned his name. And Paul George gets a little help on offense with Jeff Teague. But the interesting thing about Indiana is they're going in a completely different direction than where they were, because I think Larry Bird at some point just said, God, where is the offense? I want to watch the ball go through the hoop. So you get rid of some guys that are good defenders, and you bring in guys that are more one way, like Teague and Al Jefferson. I think Indiana's probably going to give up a lot of points, but at the same token, they're going to score a lot more. And yeah, I think Miles Turner's going in a good direction. Paul George, maybe this is going to be his time to really show out and climb that Eastern Conference. I think it's going to be hard to surpass Boston. But overall, I think Indiana, I think like you said, I think it's a net positive. I don't think they got like much better. I don't think they got a ton better. Just because Jeff Teague and Al Jefferson, they're really just not proven winners. They get the job done a little bit on the stat line. Teague turns it over, doesn't play too much defense. Jefferson plays no defense.
All right.
Their offense gets a lot better.
Let's with Al Jefferson, you could say
I love playing devil's advocate here.
Oh no! With Al Jefferson, he's a backup center, and you got him for $10 million.
They got him at a great, They got him for a great deal.
But with Jeff Teague, I think that's a big upgrade because of what he can do on the offensive end. And in your point of him not being a winner, did the Hawks not have the top seed in the East 2 years ago? I mean, was he not an all-star for that team? Am I not mistaken here? I mean, let's be real here. I'm not a big Jeff Teague guy either, and I've said this I'm not someone that's very big on Jeff Teague, but I think for what they had at point guard, you now have at least the top 15 point guard. I don't know if I would put George Hill as that. I think Jeff Teague is in that top 10 to 15 range. I don't think he's high in that range, but I think he's there. So you add Jeff Teague to that team. If you want to move fast, you're building your team a certain way. If they want to play a slower style of game, is Jeff Teague the right addition? Not necessarily, but you want to speed things up, Teague over George Hill, and you don't really give up anything in doing that, it's fine. I mean, you're going to have to pay Jeff Teague after this year, but I guess they're committed to doing that.
Yeah, and one other thing, I also love Frank Vogel, and I think that's just part of the flipping the script in the direction you're going. McMillan is more that guy who's going to lead the offensive charge, I guess. He was an assistant on Vogel's bench, correct?
Yeah, he's been an assistant.
He's got promoted. So then the one thing that worries me about Jeff Teague is the fact that Atlanta just gave him away, and what they got a draft pick, right? So they're
Torian Prince, yeah. Well,
so
but they didn't give him away. They gave him away because they had two point guards.
Dennis Schroeder, if
they didn't have Schroeder, they wouldn't have given him away. It's I guess and I don't know if that's the right decision on their part. They made a interesting gamble there because we've seen Spurs of Dennis Schroeder looking really good, but they took a little bit of a gamble and they weren't sold on Jeff Teague, which is a fair point on your part. But I don't know. If Jeff Teague fits Indiana's style, I don't see the issue with it. And I think overall, and they might not be done. The other thing is, there were some rumors of Monte Ellis's name being floated out there. So maybe they deal Ellis at some point. But I think he was a good fit for them last year, so I don't see the reason to. And he'll be good in up-tempo style play.
Yeah, I think Indiana, they'll be fine. I think they could win, I don't know, 45, 48 games, maybe 50. It depends how weak the Eastern Conference ends up being. I don't think they're in that top tier with Boston and Cleveland. So I think they could be a 3 seed, definitely, but I think there's a bunch of teams that could be
You're telling me
Boston's a lot better than Indiana. Yeah.
Boston, Toronto? Boston jumped Toronto, you're telling me?
Yeah.
You think?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not – I don't know about that one.
Toronto loses.
Let's listen. If you're that high on Boston, I imagine they're one of the teams you really liked what they did this offseason. So I'll let you make the case for Boston. I'm going to counter that right now. So you can go first.
Good. I think what Boston did is they didn't rush a trade. They didn't force their assets to get a guy like Jimmy Butler. They didn't force anything to get Westbrook, although he wasn't quite on the market. Al Horford is a really good center in this league. That's something they needed. They still need shooting. But they like Avery Bradley. They like Marcus Smart. They like Jay Crowder. All those guys are healthy at the same time. Brad Stevens has shown he can win 50 games with that team. So you put Horford in there, and I think they're in a pretty good spot. And Toronto didn't improve at all. So I don't think they're going to surpass where they were last year, and I think Boston's going to climb them.
Yeah, but where they were last year was, what, a game and a half behind Cleveland? they were right there. They had a top 4 record in the league. I mean,
Right.
it doesn't
I think
matter if
Boston can be that good.
I mean, I don't know, because as great as Al Horford is in some aspects of the game, I do think there's still some to be desired with him, and he fits in well. Let's be fair, he does fit in well in Boston, but I don't know. I mean, there's still plenty of question marks with this team in terms of being great to the level that you see them as. And look, I think the way I see them, they're between 3 and like 6 in the conference. But I think there's enough other teams that are competitive to the point where, Brad Stevens will win plenty of these games. You mentioned it. I think he will. But I'm not entirely sold on, that team and the way they to Jaylen Brown. I don't judge that until you see the guy on the floor. And summer league, he didn't look great. But now you have so many assets in the cupboard still, and you had a chance to really bring in a guy that can help you compete legitimately for conference finals, challenge Cleveland a little bit. If you bring in Jimmy Butler with that pick, I mean, 'cause they could have. I mean, Chicago wanted Chris Dunn so badly. They would have taken him at 3. They would have done it. Minnesota wanted Chris Dunn. They obviously got him, but they would have, found a way to, maneuver if they had to, to Toronto right now. I just don't see that because Toronto loses Biyombo, but they still have that core back, and that core is only getting better. I think they bring in Jared Sullinger, which is, I mean, they made some low-key signings to fill out the roster, but you have the core back in Toronto. They're not getting any worse. They're only getting better. It's a young team. And I don't think Boston did enough because there are still some obvious holes. They play the game hard. Brad Stevens is a tremendous coach, like I've said. But, Isaiah Thomas, tremendous season last year. You got to see, I mean, Al Horford's a great fit there. But I think there's there's still so many guys that are good, not great on that roster where they'll be fine, but there's still plenty of teams above them. So I don't see them in that 2-spot challenge in Cleveland just yet. But I think they're in position to. They keep this team and then make the right trade when it's available.
Yeah, I think Horford, this is really the team for him. I think he's going to have more of an opportunity to play his game here than he did in Atlanta. He wasn't featured as much there, I don't think. And I don't think Isaiah Thomas is going to have the year he had exactly, but it's going to be distributed. It's going to be distributed other places. And Jaylen Brown is going to be an elite wing defender the second he steps on the court, just by his size and quickness and his effort. If you watched him, this guy can body up anyone in the NBA just looking at him. And I sound like Alex Lebowitz here, like preaching how great the Celtics are going to be. But I think they really did a good job, and I think they got a little bit better. I don't think Toronto got better. But they're both going to be up there, and one of them's going to have to be Cleveland. Don't know if either of them.
And neither of them will.
Right. So it's a moot point at some point, but both teams, they're going to be up there in the East.
It's fair to say. And I guess I'll give a final team that I really liked what they did this offseason. And as I think about my choice here, and I guess
you're gonna say Brooklyn
in this scenario, I'm just gonna give them a shout out just because this isn't a team that's going anywhere per se, but they made something out of nothing in that of the Dallas Mavericks, because they're a team that they've been in that middle, just bottom of the West for a few years now. They've been a borderline playoff team. Last year they made it to 6 due to a weakened, watered down West, because Dallas, their win-loss record was not that great in what we've seen from the West in years past. Because in years past, it's been you need about 50 wins to even crack the playoffs. But last year we saw Dallas. I mean, they brought in Darren Williams. They were all right. But the Harrison Barnes deal, which everyone is quick to, kind of poke fun at with the way Barnes played in the finals. But you bring him in, you take a chance on a guy like that when you're kind of in a no-win situation, stuck smack dab in the middle. You take that chance, and at worst case, you overpaid the guy, and he doesn't turn out to be what you want him to be.
Someone's going to give him a max.
Yeah, I mean, he was going to get it from somewhere. You had to pay him that much, and you're in a situation right now where, you're not winning a title. So why not check that out? getting Andrew Bogut just really for nothing. And then they made some, a few low-key moves to fill out that roster too. You don't know what you'll get from D-Will at the point, but between him and Barea back there, they'll be all right. Wesley Matthews coming back fully healthy, hopefully, you'd like to think, because I think he rushed that a little bit last year. I think that's noticeable in the way he came back last year early and he wasn't himself right off the bat. I think he fits in nicely now that they've added more pieces. Dirk still being there, but I like the Dallas at least knowing that they're in that middle of the road situation. Not much they can do there. They at least took a chance with Harrison Barnes, and I like the way they do that. And if anyone's going to find to make it work, Rick Carlisle's at the top, without a doubt, in that top tier coaches. I know we kind of can agree to disagree on where Billy Donovan falls in there. We talked about earlier, but
he'll be up there eventually.
Yeah, he'll be up there. Yeah, maybe you could say it's a little too early. Maybe I jumped the gun there, but Rick Carlisle is absolutely there. And I think, I don't know if you agree or disagree on that, but I think Rick Carlisle, he's proven to be at the top. So I just like the way he went about making something out of nothing. So I just want to give them a shout out in that regard.
Yeah, and that's kind of what they have to do. They're kind of held hostage in a way by Dirk Nowitzki, but he got them a championship. So as long as he's
earned
there,
that,
they have to try and compete. I think they should have gone into rebuild a few years ago. It's kind of similar to the Lakers, but when you have Dirk there, you can't really stomach that. You can't really lose games when he's out there. You got to try and win for him. So yeah, Dallas, they're going to have a hard time breaking ground in the West. I mean, they're going to be that 7-8 seed, that 9 that's going to try and climb into the playoffs. Who knows? Maybe Harrison Barnes will have a really good year.
That's what I'm saying.
There's no problem giving him a 4-year max. Bogut's cheap, like you said. He'll protect the rim. Maybe he'll give you 20 minutes. If you get 50 games out of Wesley Matthews, that's probably a plus. So yeah, I think Dallas will be all right.
West didn't miss that many games last year. He just wasn't as effective.
He was just banged up. Right.
Yeah.
And if you can get 50, 60 games at peak Wesley Matthews where he's knocking down shots and playing defense on the other end, he can really help the team. And that team he used to help was the Portland Trailblazers. I'll just transition quick to talk about one more team. They had a weird offseason. I think Evan Turner was the main guy for their offseason, but I mean, they overpaid him severely, and he's not a guy that fits their offense in the way that they have Lillard and McCollum. They needed a 3-and-D guy there, and they got a guy who's a 3 guy, but he needs the ball in his hands, and he likes to make plays in the assist category, and has really no jumper. And they spent a lot of money on Lillard and McCollum, deservedly so. But Portland was a team that could really take that next step, and I don't think they did it.
Yeah, and they let the Nets restricted free agency grab of Allen Crabbe come back to force them to pay that monstrous contract. And it's one thing for a team like the Nets, who doesn't have a chance to go anywhere for a few years based on the Celtics having all those draft picks, that you can take a chance on a guy like that and both the teams matching due to situations where they lost them, where they were in situations where they kind of had to do it. I mean, I think with Miami, it definitely made sense to match for Tyler Johnson, but for Portland to match Allen Crabbe, he's the 3rd highest paid guy on that team. He's making so much money. He's making over $18 million this year for a guy that we haven't seen as a starter, and how is he going to fit in on that team? It's one thing in Brooklyn where he would have been the clear 2 or 3 right there, and he would have played crazy minutes. But now you got to rotate him in Portland along with Evan Turner, who you paid all that money to, and then, of course, Dame and CJ. So I don't know if that was the right move, and I know Portland weighed that back and forth as to whether or not that kind of contract the Nets threw out, but we'll find out how they want to use him. But with how much they paid him, you'd like to think they're going to play him a good amount, but I don't know if there's space on the roster now that you brought Evan Turner in too. I mean, they might have some buyer's remorse on one of those 2 guys.
Yeah, and I think it's going to be Turner. I don't mind the Crabbe deal as much, just because he's a young guy who he's come off the bench and done a good job. Put the ball in the hoop. He's a guy who can score. Evan Turner is getting to that twilight part of his career, even though he's probably only around 30, but he's not going to improve at this point. And you gave him a 4-year deal, and you could have spent that money on a center somewhere where they've been starting Mason Plumlee. They could have gone and got a guy like a Zealy or a Bismack Biyombo. Or a Mozgov even for cheaper than the Lakers got him. So Portland, not great. And just one more team, I don't want to take too long on this. the Rockets, they went in a weird direction. They went in the offensive direction like Indiana did. Since they have Mike D'Antoni, they brought in Ryan Anderson on a 4-year deal, Eric Gordon on a long deal, two guys that really, they haven't contributed too much in the NBA, or they've been hurt. So pretty much what those guys are going to give you, and it doesn't start with a D. It's not defense. So they're going to have to put up 120, 130.
Well, Ryan Anderson's contributed. He was on those Magic teams for a while where they were a good team, and he was a key cog on there. So let's not forget that. I mean, he's been in a situation in New Orleans. It's been a little odd, being as they put a bunch of guys in there they thought would produce better than they would. Around Anthony Davis, they had the one playoff year, but Ryan Anderson getting paid a lot, getting paid $20 million a year.
The year is the real problem.
Yeah, but for Eric Gordon, I mean, for how much they paid him, he was making a ridiculous. I think he made more money on his previous deal that he had in New Orleans, if I'm not mistaken, or it was close enough. I mean, he's not making too much. I think he's making $13 a year with Houston, but I mean, I guess it's fine. You give up Dwight Howard if you're Houston, and it clearly wasn't the right fit. Yeah, I think Clint Capella is going to be a tremendous fit if you want to play that up-tempo style. If you're going to have enough guys in the team that can't play defense, like two guys, say if your starters, you have two guys that cannot defend, you need to surround them with others that really can, and Clint Capella can protect the rim. So you have him there, and if you're running with Pat Beverly at point, he can really defend to make up for Smith the wing. And then I guess you assume you put Anderson in at the 4, and then I guess Gordon could be kind of like a super sub there, coming off as the 6-man, however you want to play that. But look, it's going to be fun. It's Mike D'Antoni offense. I mean, he's coached your team. He's coached a lot of different teams in recent years, having coached the Knicks too. But Mike D'Antoni likes to push it, and we'll see if the Rockets can be well-rounded enough as a team. But they made interesting moves. I think that's the best word to really characterize it all.
Yeah, they're going to be another team that it's kind of hard to tell where they're going to fall in that Western Conference. They could conceivably miss the playoffs if all goes wrong, or they could be probably a 5 or 6 seed if things go really well.
I mean, I just think with James Harden, you have someone that's that uber talented. We saw it last year in again, like I said, a watered down Western Conference. He brings enough to the table alone where he can carry you, and he did that last year. He can carry you to a playoff spot. It doesn't mean you're going anywhere, but he has that ability. And if some of the other pieces matriculate a little better, they could theoretically get to like a 5 seed. I don't think that's out of reach for them, depending on how things shape up. And again, 2 years ago, they were in the Western Conference Finals. Somehow, some way, they were in the Western Conference Finals. So you never know how things will play out. But Houston is definitely a different team than they were this time last year. And they have a different coaching regime in place. They have different team around James Harden. They gave him an extension. Let's not forget that. So he is there for the long haul. And we'll see how it all plays out in Houston. But I think we've harped on it enough. We've gone through all the teams here. Connor, any final thoughts in particular before we wrap this one up?
Yeah, I guess just the fact that Kevin Durant was the big story of this free agency, but under that, there's still a lot of things to talk about that are going to make the NBA interesting. The Knicks have their own super team. Dwayne Wade went to Chicago. Rondo went to Chicago. There's some young up-and-coming teams like Minnesota. The Denver Nuggets have really good young pieces. Team like Milwaukee, how are they going to bounce back? So, I mean, if you're a real deep NBA fan, there's a lot of cool things to look forward to, and I think that's the takeaway. And it's going to be who can take down the Warriors. That's the storyline going in. Everyone's going to be out for blood, and that's going to bring excitement, I think.
One thing before we go that I'll just have to mention is that a lot of people, as soon as Durant signed with the Warriors, and there are things about the deal I'm not a big fan of, and I'm just right now I think we've gone enough. I'm not going to go about it, at least this episode. I'm sure it's some.
We go another hour about that.
Yeah, I think at some point there'll be time for a Kevin Durant discussion. This is not the time, but I will say that the big thing everyone says is, okay, why? Like, not everyone. Obviously, basketball junkies are going to watch because they're basketball junkies, but people that are critical of the NBA say, okay, this is ridiculous. You have the two guys that have won the last 3 MVP awards playing on the same team, on a team that just won 73 games in a regular season, what's the point of even watching? You just rattled off the top of your head, like, what, 5 or 6 different, interesting storylines. And there are so many more I can think off the top of my head.
Left out some, yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot to watch in the NBA this year. And although, yeah, the Warriors will be a dominant team, they're clearly the favorites.
You're going to want to see
LeBron defending his title alone. I mean, there's so much to watch. And I don't think it gets enough credit. And I think people that want to, commit the necessary time to really watch the NBA through and through and not just say, okay, look, the Warriors are winning everything. Look at the rest of the league, and there's a lot to watch. And I think it's fun, and that there's a reason why the salary cap boomed the way it did this deal. This year, that's TV money, and that comes because of the people watching. And there's more to come, and I think it's going to be a very exciting year. We've seen a crazy offseason. Now it's time for Rio. Let's see some Olympic basketball. Let's see how Team USA puts out there in front of the world.
Yeah, last thing, people just need to remember that the Heat didn't win year 1 of their super team, and injuries can happen anytime. You never know what's going to happen. I think it's going to be a ball.
Rome wasn't built in one day, as they like to say. But that's all we got for this one. That's Connor. I'm Koop. Thank you for listening to the K&C Cast. Thank you again. Global basketball. It's going to be fun adding this to the site. There's a lot of interesting content there, and we're kind of getting a team together, a lot of guys, and myself and Connor included in that mix that are going to put some content out in the near future. There's already some guys contributing from around the world, but we're kind of going to up the ante here with the site, get things going. I'm happy this podcast is also on board there. So thank you for listening. Tune in next time. We'll kind of get a schedule going soonish. For now, it's on a need to know basis, you could say, but
kind of schedule.
Yeah, depending on how things play out here. But yeah, once the season gets going, and once teams start having camp and everything, then we can get kind of a weekly thing going. But for now, it's on a newsworthy basis. But we'll have it going on the site here. Thank you for watching.